Yesterday, Britain, Canada, Australia, and Portugal officially recognized Palestine as a state, a unilateral move that has long been opposed by the U.S. and Israel. More countries are expected to do the same this week as world leaders gather in New York for the UN General Assembly.
And this is mostly a symbolic act of support for Palestine, but it does add pressure on Israel to ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
The recognition puts key allies at odds now with the United States. So joining us now is UCLA professor Benjamin Radd. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Can we just start with the significance of these countries recognizing Palestine now?
Well, the significance now is that it puts additional pressure on all parties, on both sides, I should say, to reach some kind of an agreement. It gives an incentive to the Palestinians as a whole, though in some ways some argue that it also enables and empowers Hamas to continue its current trajectory. But for Israel, it basically means that there's a little turning back to a situation where a two-state solution is not on the table, given that these countries will formally recognize, and in doing so, are establishing diplomatic and trade relations that go beyond the current status they have now.
And these news put close allies at odds with the Trump administration. So how could it affect U.S. influence in this entire peace process?
Well, it now puts the United States in an odd position where it is the only permanent member of the Security Council that does not recognize statehood, or soon to be that, I should say, and makes any maneuvers in the UN now even more difficult because it will potentially isolate the United States in these Security Council resolutions and these votes. And therefore, the United States has to now justify why it is, the single holdout on, for example, issues that might arise before the committee or the council that have to be decided upon.
Well, one of the reasons critics say that this could be rewarding terrorism. You might be inviting more attacks like we saw on October 7th. What do you think about that?
Well, there is one argument definitely to be made that what is the state going to look like? That it's not enough to recognize statehood, and that you recognize statehood when certain goals have been achieved, when there have been certain steps taken. And Hamas has not demonstrated that it wants any part of that whatsoever. It wants all of the benefits of being a state without the hard work of actually living up to international obligations and international law. So in that sense, yes, it is rewarding them. But on the flip side of this is that nothing indicates that Hamas will be part of any future state governing apparatus in Palestine when it does come to fruition. So it's unclear exactly what all this means. Again, like you said, beyond it just being symbolic and performative.
Yeah, and the fact that we're talking about it being symbolic, that recognition, what does this mean really moving forward?
Well, it means now that if there are, let's say, trade disputes, if there are, it subjects Israel to international law in a way different than before. So, for example, if there are, once you have formal relations between states, then if there are certain obligations under international law that apply to states that are not being met, then, for example, the Europeans can pursue, stronger methods like sanctions or diplomatic isolation even further. Basically, there are options that open up to states under international law once they are dealing with other states that do not apply if they're dealing with, let's say, territories in this case.
It's reported that Netanyahu is going to be visiting with President Trump as an aside to just being at the UN. What do you make of that meeting, and what could come of that?
Well, it's interesting to see what's going to happen, given that there's also reports this morning of a letter being sent by Hamas directly to President Trump, asking for his support in pushing a 60-day ceasefire in return, or a 60-day pause in fighting, let's call it, in return for a release of half of the hostages. It's a hope to jumpstart talks following Israel's attack on Hamas leaders in Doha a few weeks ago. How President Trump responds to that, how he responds to Netanyahu's suggestions about what to do next with regards to the Israeli ground invasion into Gaza, all of this remains to be seen. I don't think we're clear yet on what the outcome will be.
Okay, Benjamin Radd, thank you so much for joining us this morning and breaking all that down.
Thank you.